Okay, hi team. Here to talk to you about what you're going to be doing with the sub today. Pretty straightforward. I want to review a couple of passages with you from Frankenstein, and then I also want to remind you that you're going to be reading the essay from Gia Tolentino titled "A Man Was Murdered in Cold Blood and You're Laughing." And then also you're going to have some time to maybe work on the rest of the homework assignment, chapters 11 through 14. Okay, so I want to plant some seeds also for some connections that you guys can make between the book and your non-literary text, especially as we're thinking about the IO that's coming up. I posted a reading schedule in the Frankenstein module on Canvas for you to look at. So if you're absent over the next month or so, it paces out how the rest of the book is going to flow for us. In mid-March, we're going to finish reading the book and you guys are going to have a discussion. You're going to write your essay, and then we get into the IO preparation. So we spend about a month and a half preparing for the IO before you all begin delivering your IO starting on May 11th. Um, Okay, so in preparation for that, remember that your IO is going to be choosing two different texts and you have one basis of criteria. So one thing that you could potentially say as we're thinking about the work that we're going to do today in class is thinking about this idea of justice and how does justice show up or how is it portrayed within Mary Shelley's Frankenstein? And then what does justice look like in the essay that you're going to read from Gia Tolentino? Um, okay, so if everyone can follow along with me on page 80, like we're in class, at the very top, and it says, everybody believed that poor girl to be guilty, talking about Justine. And if she could have committed the crime for which she suffered, assuredly she would have been the most depraved of human creatures. For the sake of a few jewels to have murdered the son of her benefactor and a friend, a child whom she had nursed from its birth and appeared to love as if it had been her own. I could not consent to the death of any human being, but certainly I should have thought such a creature unfit to remain in society of men. But she was innocent. I know, I feel she was innocent. You are of the same opinion, and that confirms me. Alas, Victor, when falsehood can look so like the truth, who can assure themselves of certain happiness? I feel as if I were walking on the edge of a precipice towards which thousands are crowding and endeavoring to plunge me into the abyss. William and Justine were assassinated, and the murderer escapes. He walks about the world free and perhaps respected. But even if I were condemned to suffer on the scaffold for the same crimes, I would not change places with such a wretch. I listened to this discourse with the extremest agony. I, not indeed, but in effect, was the true murderer. Okay, so here, remember, this is all in Victor's thoughts, where he is taking accountability, where he knows that he is responsible for the murder of Justine and also his brother William, because he made the creature. Elizabeth read my anguish in my countenance and kindly taking my hand said, "My dearest friend, you must calm yourself. These events have affected me. God knows how deeply, but I am not so wretched as you are. There is an expression of despair and sometimes of revenge in your countenance that makes me tremble. Dear Victor, banish these dark passions. Remember the friends around you who center all their hopes in you. Have we lost the power of rendering you happy? Ah, while we love, while we are true to each other, here in this land of peace and beauty, your native country, we may reap every tranquil blessing. What can disturb our peace?" Okay, so Victor knows Elizabeth and Victor are speaking. Elizabeth thinks that Victor is so upset just because of the death of Justine and his brother. But we know, so there's some dramatic irony going on here. We know that Victor is so upset because he's responsible for creating the creature, and so then he knows that he's responsible for the death of his brother and Justine. Okay, so he gets real bummed out and he's gonna go climb some mountains. So he's gonna be in the mountains, and the creature is gonna run up on Victor in the mountains and is gonna confront him on page 86. Okay, so the creature confronts him, and we're going to start at the first full paragraph on page 86. And this is Victor speaking. He says, "Devil," I exclaimed, "do you dare approach me? And do you not fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked on your miserable head? Begone, vile insect, or rather stay, that I may trample you to dust, and know that I could, with the extinction of your miserable existence, restore those victims whom you have so diabolically murdered." Okay, so Victor immediately calls him disgusting, calls him the devil, calls him an insect, and then threatens to kill him. I expected this reception, said the demon. All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creator to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. Okay, so the creature reminds him, like, I am only terrible because you are terrible, Victor. You and I are bound for life until one of us dies. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you with the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends. Okay, so for the creature, justice looks like Victor doing whatever it is that the creature wants, or else the creature, because he is very big, he's very strong, he can survive really intense weather conditions. He plans to kill all of Victor's friends and family. Okay, so is that justice for what has happened to this creature? I want you to be thinking about that. Um, okay, we're gonna read a little bit more, and then we're gonna skip forward to the creature retelling his story. Okay, abhorrent, and this is Victor speaking again on page 86. Abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation. Come on then, and I may extinguish the spark which I so negligently bestowed. My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily eluded me and said, Be calm. I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred on my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple. I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my nature, Lord and King, if thou wilt also perform thy part the which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember, I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I am alone irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. Okay, again, the creature is trying to put some responsibility onto Victor in this moment, where he reminds him that, well, first Victor tries to come at the creature, and the creature is easily able to dodge Victor. And he's like, Do you not remember that you made me into like this superhuman who could very easily kill you? And the creature also says that he thinks that life is very sacred, and so he doesn't want to get into this battle to death with Victor. Um, and then he makes this comparison where he calls Victor, God, and the creature calls himself Adam, and saying that Victor created the creature and then abandoned him. And so the creature, again, to come full circle, is trying to put some responsibility back on Victor, for abandoning him. Okay. Um, Oh, and the creature also says like he knows enough about the world now to be able to decide or tell Victor what he needs to be happy. And so again, justice for the creature is that if Victor does what he asks him to, then he will feel like order and balance will be restored in the world. Victor responds, Begone, I will not hear you. There can be no community between you and me. We are enemies. Begone, or let us try our strength in a fight in which one must fall. Okay, so again, Victor wants to fight the creature to the death, even though the creature is regularly reminding Victor, Listen, I am your creation, which is the creature suggesting, like, I am your child. And Victor wants to fight his child, quote unquote, to death. Okay, so the creature is gonna make a deal with Victor where he's like, let me tell you my whole story. Like, I don't want to fight you. I want to tell you my whole story. and then we can decide what our next steps are going to be. Okay, so chapter 11. This is the creature speaking, and I want you to think about all the ways that the creature describes himself as being a baby coming into the world. All right, page 90, chapter 11. It is with considerable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. Okay, so original era of my being means him being born. So the creature, much like a baby, has no memory of being born, and all of his memories of when he was really young, are really hard for him to remember. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and I saw, felt, heard, and smelt at the same time, and was indeed a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. Okay, so again, kind of like a baby, he knows that he has all of these senses to be able to navigate the world. It takes him a while to be able to figure out which is which. By degrees, I remember, a stronger light pressed upon my nerves, so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness then came over me and troubled me. But hardly had I felt this when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose, the light poured in upon me again. I walked, and I believe descended, but I presently found a great alteration in my sensations. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me, impervious to my touch or sight. But now I found that I could wander on at liberty with no obstacles which I could not either surmount or avoid. Okay, so the creature is also talking about how he learned how sleep works, where light pours in on him, darkness comes, light comes back again. So it could be like sleep cycles. It could be he understands how the days work. And then he also learns how to walk, where before he would walk a little bit, descend, fall down, bump into things, but now the creature can walk pretty smoothly. Okay, still in that same paragraph on page 90. Um, The light became more and more oppressive to me, and the heat wearying me as I walked. I sought a place where I could receive shade. This was the forest near Ingolstadt, and here I lay by the side of a brook, resting from my fatigue, until I felt tormented by hunger and thirst. This roused me from my nearly dormant state, and I ate some berries which I found hanging on the trees or lying on the ground. I slaked my thirst in the brook, and then laying down was overcome by sleep. It was dark when I awoke. I felt cold also, and half frightened, as it were, instinctively finding myself so desolate before I had quitted your apartment on a sensation of cold. I had covered myself with some clothes, but these were insufficient to secure me from the dews of night. I was a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew and could distinguish nothing, but feeling pain invade me on all sides. I sat down and wept. Okay, he is cold, he's all alone, he doesn't know what things are, and so he just sits down and he cries. Okay, kind of like a baby. Soon a gentle light stole over the heavens and gave me a sensation of pleasure. I started up and beheld a radiant form rise from among the trees. I gazed with a kind of wonder. It moved slowly, but it enlightened my path, and I again went out in search of berries. Oh, yeah, he cries because it's dark and he's still awake, so he's scared of the dark. Normal. I found a huge cloak with which I covered myself and sat down upon the ground. No distinct ideas occupied my mind. All was confused. I felt light and hunger and thirst and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. The only object I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. Okay, he's only occupied by survival mode as he's starting to learn about the world, and he has no thoughts, which when you're little, you have thoughts, but they're very much rooted in your survival, or so people theorize, basic needs like need for safety, food, and drink, and to use the bathroom. Okay, let's read a little bit more about this baby creature. Several changes of day and night passed, and the orb of night had greatly lessened. When I began to distinguish my sensations from each other, I gradually saw plainly the clear stream that supplied me with drink and the trees that shaded me with their foliage. I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound, which often saluted my ears, proceeded from the little throats of winged animals who had often intercepted the light from my eyes. Okay, so as he started to learn about the world, he's like, oh, there's these little winged animals that sing this song that make me happy when I hear it. I began also to observe with greater accuracy the forms that surrounded me and to perceive the boundaries of the radiant roof of light which canopied me. Sometimes I tried to imitate the pleasant songs of birds, but was unable. Sometimes I wish to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence. Okay, so the creature, he tries to talk. Well, first he tries to sing with the birds, and he's like, I do not sound like these birds. And then he feels all these emotions inside of him, and he tries to express it with words, but nothing comes out but gibberish. Okay, again, like a baby. The moon had disappeared from the night and again, with a lessened form, showed itself while I still remained in the forest. My sensations had by this time become distinct, and my mind received every day additional ideas. My eyes became accustomed to light and to perceive objects in their right forms. I distinguished the insect from the herb, and by degrees one herb from another. I found that the sparrow uttered none but harsh notes, whilst those of the blackbird and thrush were sweet and enticing. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire. Okay, so he's gonna go to different groups of people where he's like, oh, people, they're gonna want to help me. And they don't want to help him, they only want to harm him. Okay, so then he starts to learn pattern recognition. I can't go and talk to people because when they see me, they're super scared of me. Okay, so then he goes out into the forest, and if we can turn now to page 95, um, he chooses this little cave that he eventually goes to, like, quote unquote live in, and it's right next to a cottage. Okay. And there's a little family that lives in the cottage, brother, sister, and a dad. Being thus provided, I resolved to reside in this hovel until something should occur which might alter my determination. I was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence, the rain-dropping branches and dank earth. I ate my breakfast with pleasure and was about to remove a plank to procure myself a little water when I heard a step. And looking through a small chink, I beheld a young creature with a pail on her head, passing before my hovel. The girl was young and of gentle demeanor, unlike what I have since found cottagers and farmhouse servants to be. Yet she was meanly dressed, a coarse blue petticoat and a linen jacket being her only garb. Her fair hair was plaited but not adorned. She looked patient yet sad. I lost sight of her, and in about a quarter of an hour she returned bearing the pail, which was now partly filled with milk. As she walked along, seeming incommoded by the burden, a young man met her, whose countenance expressed a deep despondence. Despondence meaning sadness. Uttering a few words with an air of melancholy, he took the pail from her head and bore it to the cottage himself. She followed him, and they disappeared. Presently, I saw the young man again, with some tools in his hand, cross the field behind the cottage, and the girl was also busied, sometimes in the house and sometimes in the yard. On examining my dwelling, I found that one of the windows of the cottage had formerly occupied a part of it, but the panes had been filled up with wood. In one of these was a small and almost imperceptible chink through which the eye could just penetrate. Through this crevice, a small room was visible, whitewashed and clean, but very bare of furniture. In one corner, in a small fire, sat an old man, leaning his head on his hands in a disconsolate attitude. Okay, all three of these people who are living in this little cottage next to the creature, super bummed out. Okay, we don't know why yet. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer, which emptied her hands, and she sat down beside the old man, who, taking up an instrument, began to play and to produce sounds sweeter than the voice of the thrush or the nightingale. Okay, they're real bummed out, but guess what? These people can still make art. So the old man, he busts out this instrument and he starts to sing too, and it's lovely, and the creature likes it. It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch, who had never beheld aught before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love. He played a sweet mournful air while which I perceived drew tears from the eyes of his amiable companion, of which the old man took no notice until she sobbed audibly. He then produced a few sounds, and the fair creature, leaving her work, knelt at his feet. He raised her and smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. Okay, as he, the creature, is watching the cottagers, he sees this mixture of these different feelings. They can be super sad, but they can feel relief through the consumption and production of art. Um, it can bring out really strong emotions. The girl starts to cry because of the song, but then she feels comforted by having the old man there. The creature, watching all of this, he gets overwhelmed and he can't watch it anymore. He looks away because he starts to see how these people, so sad, but they're able to feel relief by being together in different ways. Either just their company with each other, or through the things that they're able to create together, and it's overwhelming to the creature. Um, Okay, they were a mixture of pain and pleasure, such as I had never before experienced, either from hunger or cold, warmth or food, and I withdrew from the window unable to bear these emotions. Okay, the creature has also showed us this progression, much like you have gone through as children, where you start out and everything is just rooted in your survival. You don't know how to articulate anything, you don't know what you think. Emotions are simple. You're sad, you're happy, you're angry. The creature is starting to develop more complex emotions as he's able to watch these people and he feels both pain because he feels loneliness that he doesn't have anyone, but also pleasure and that he feels the relief that they feel when they're in community with each other. And he also feels the power of this music and art that they're able to produce together. Um, Okay. So then he watches them and the things that they do together, and he sees like, oh, they work so hard to just like survive the way that they do. And the one thing that allows them to feel some relief is that they are able to be together as a family. So for the creature, think about the seed that he's trying to plant for Victor. This starts to become the justice that the creature wants. You made me, you abandoned me, Victor. Justice for me would be to be able to have companionship because I've watched how beneficial it can be for people who are suffering in the world. Okay, next thing that you're going to do is that you are going to read the essay, A Man Was Murdered in Cold Blood, and You're Laughing. There's some slides on Canvas for you to be able to see. So to give context, in December of 2024, a CEO of a healthcare company, Brian Thompson, was shot and killed by who we now know is suspected to be Luigi Mangione. Um, and this article was written before it was discovered that Luigi Mangione was the main suspect in this murder. Gia Tolentino is going to go through and she's going to talk about what justice looks like for these people who, well, she's interested in like why the internet reacted the way that it did to his shooting. So in the slide, I have she's going to mention these tweets that were tweeted, and I have screenshots of what she's talking about. So when the healthcare company, United Healthcare, when they announced the shooting and the death of Brian Thompson, they had to monitor the comments and also limit the comments because people overwhelmingly were laughing as the result of this death. And then people were then saying or they were sharing all of these stories on Twitter and on social media by trying to suggest that justice for them was that Brian Thompson died because he is responsible for the death and suffering of so many other people through denying them healthcare coverage. And so Gia Tolentino, she's really interested in like, okay, is that actually justice? Like, what would justice look like in this situation that has caused so many people to suffer? Brian Thompson and his family to suffer, and then also all of these people who suffered because they thought that they were going to be covered by health insurance and they ended up having their coverage denied. So go through and read the essay, do your non-literary text slideshow, read chapters 11 through 14 for your homework. Email me if you have any questions, and I will see you on Tuesday. Bye bye.